Hi, my name's Chloe. I'm a teacher, and today I'm going to talk to you about how we can promote student collaboration and peer assessment with Edrolo. All right, so what do we mean by this? Often when we talk about collaborative learning, we know that we're talking about students working together, but we want to make sure that they're not working in isolation of one another in a group. We want to make sure that they're obviously interacting and truly working together. Peer assessment takes things a step further and actually gets students evaluating each other's progress and then providing feedback on each other's work, usually using a set of protocols that we'll talk about today. So why do we do this? Well, we know that the research shows that when students work together and learn from one another, there are a myriad of benefits. The ones that I think that are most important are that it improves students' higher order thinking skills, their ability to communicate and to communicate clearly, and it also prepares them for real life situations. Okay, so before we look at some examples, I'm just going to direct you to the additional resources tab where you'll find access to our knowledge bank where you can find out more about collaboration and peer assessment, and also to the Edrolo blog where you can find out so much more about pedagogy and best practice in teaching and learning. All right, so for example 1, we're going to look at how we can progress beyond misconceptions. In order to do this, you need to make sure that your students have completed a progress check or a topic test in the platform. So please make sure that you have those unlocked for your students. So just this little padlock unlocked, and then lock it once you don't want your students to jump back in. You'll see that once you've got your submissions, the bar's going to turn green. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and we're going to see how our students have gone with those questions. So what we can see here is this data gives us a bit of an overview, and I actually think the graph at the bottom is quite useful because it gives you the class average across those questions. So you'll see here that this last question, question 1G, seems to be a question that was actually quite challenging for my class. So that probably highlights to me that there might be a misconception that could be common across the class. So in order to address this, you could get your students working in groups and going back and reviewing that question and identifying, well, what could be those misconceptions? Are they misconceptions that as a student I've previously held myself, and why might they exist? This is really going to help with their higher order thinking and make sure that they don't make those same mistakes down the line. As an option, once you've got that question, you could get your students to identify a misconception and then rewrite a question where the misconception is the correct answer. And that's an additional challenge for them. All right, for example 2, we've got check yourself. So what this entails is for students to actually go back and review some of the questions that they've completed and then switch with a partner. So if I go down here, we're going to go into 3C and we're going to view some of the questions here. And I'm going to pick a short answer question. So let's have a look at 7D. So you can see I've got a range of student answers. Some of them have working, others don't. Some students haven't answered. And then your students in the platform, they'll initially be able to see just their question and then enter their response. So once they've done that, get them to switch with a partner and then view the answer. They can then use the checklist that's available for all of these short answer style questions in the platform to mark their partner's work. So this gives people a really good idea of, well, what is it that examiners are going to be looking for? How many points do I need to make sure that I demonstrate in my answer? And it makes it easy and accessible for them to see. They also have an exemplar response to refer to, and then they can also look at the video solution to support them as they're giving their peer feedback. Another variation is to get a sample response that you've created as the teacher, and you could actually project that on the board and then get your students working in groups to use this checklist to mark your sample response. For our third example, we're going to be looking at collaborative activities. So in the Edrolo products, there's quite a range of different collaborative activities that you could access. In this example, I'm going to be looking at activities in the psychology course, but you could also adapt this to case studies in the text or otherwise. So just to show you where they live, in the little clipboard next to each chapter, you'll see that if I click on that, it's expands, and then we have the 3B activities, and then there's also a teacher guide. If you click on those, they'll download and you can open them as Word documents. Just be mindful that the teacher guide has some notes and the solutions, whereas the activities is the actual document that you would give to your students. Okay, so I've just opened up one of those activities here, and this is what your students would see. So this activity comes in two parts. The first part has a graph, which is what you can see on my screen here, and it's got some activities there. And the second part has a little bit more of a comprehension style task where they've got some analysis to do, and then there's some questions. So some options that you have with these tasks to make them collaborative and get students sharing their ideas and learning from each other is to get students working on them in pairs or in small groups. Or as an alternative, you could get students working independently, but then checking in with a partner at timed intervals. So it could be every 5 or 10 minutes, checking in and then having specific discussions around that work. And you might help to guide that discussion with some questions. Or you could get students to work in groups and then complete a gallery walk. I just want you to be mindful that wherever you're getting your students to give feedback to each other, I think it's always a really nice idea to use some sort of feedback protocol. So I've given you some ideas of ones that you may have used before. The first one's the TAG protocol. So tell a positive, ask a question, give a suggestion. You could also do a SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in a grid style. Or you could give your students little notes where they could write WWW, what went well, or YNS, your next steps. In terms of how a gallery walk runs, it goes a little bit something like this. So group 1 has completed their work or their poster or the activity that you're giving them, and then they'll move around the room to the next group. So they move across to group 2 and they will leave their feedback with the feedback protocol, and the rest of the groups, as shown by my arrows here, will do the same. By the end of it, your students should then have an array of feedback that they've gotten from the rest of the class so that they then know what is it that they need to do next in order to improve the activity that they've just completed.